Leicestershire market town Castle Donington lends its name to the nearby motorsport hub that's hosted racing since 1931, making it the UK's oldest active circuit. This venue in Great Britain has been inextricably linked with the Motul FIM Superbike World Championship since hosting its inaugural round in 1988. Only Italy has hosted more races since. And before we fly back to Bologna, one last look for 2023 at the Donington Park circuit. A traditional park layout, particularly in the first half of the lap, where riders sweep between grass viewing areas with a narrow line and little room for error. The shortest circuit on the calendar, the start-finish straight measures just 550 metres, but pretty much all of the 12 turns present overtaking opportunities. Right from the first corner, it's hard braking and side-by-side into Redgate. The second half of the lap is more stop and go. The final 4 turns play heavily in favour of Toprak Razgatlioglu. From the circuit's top speed of over 270 kilometres per hour to just over 100 for the Fogarty S's. And then at the Melbourne Loop, he was at it again yesterday, passing Bautista for second on lap 3, and then Jonathan Bray on lap 6. The first full resurfacing in 2 decades was carried out this winter. We've had lap record pace all weekend, and earlier this afternoon we had the first ever lap in the 1 minute 25s, an average speed of 168.6 kilometres per hour. Let's put the finishing touches to the Prosecco DOC UK round, our 30th visit to Donington Park, and we're back in 2023 for the 64th World SBK race held here, putting the Leicestershire venue alongside Misano and third for most races staged. We've already had 2 this weekend, 1 victory each for our only winners this season so far, Alvaro Bautista and Toprak Razgatlioglu. Jonathan Bray is our only other winner here in the last 3 years. 3 world champions, 3 different manufacturers, and only half a second separated them earlier on this afternoon. Steve English alongside me to look back at that Tissot Superpole race, probably the best action we've seen this season so far.
A really exciting battle at the front with the top 3 riders on the grid, Razgatlioglu, Bautista and Ray, all fighting it out. It was actually Jonathan Ray that led most of the race, but when push came to shove at the end of the race, the last lap and a half, he dropped down to 3rd position. Alvaro Bautista not quite able to beat Razgatlioglu in the last couple of corners, but the end of this lap really is Toprak territory, and Bautista just couldn't attack enough to be able to try and take another race victory. As it was, Toprak was peerless all the way through that race, stalked Ray all the way through the first 8.5 laps, and when the opportunity presented itself, he came through to attack for the race lead. 23 laps though is going to be a very different story for him.
Razgatlioglu's victory earlier on this afternoon means that Alvaro Bautista's winning run ends at 11 consecutive victories, just as he managed at the start of 2019 and as Jonathan Ray managed in 2018. But make no mistake, Bautista is well and truly in control in the title fight. 88 points up on Razgatlioglu, 165 clear of the next nearest man, Andrea Locatelli in 3rd. Razgatlioglu victorious then in this afternoon's Superpole race will lead them off from pole this afternoon for race 2, a gain of 3 positions compared to his Superpole effort where he was restricted to the 2nd row, so that's certainly going to work in Razgatlioglu's favour. Bautista though has been a fast starter in the races this weekend thus far. He goes from P2. Jonathan Ray will complete the front row. 2nd row of the grid, Andrea Locatelli. Danilo Petrucci, his best weekend yet in the Superbike World Championship, 2 top 5 finishes for him. Alex Lowes completes that 2nd row, and then on row 3, well, it was all going on from 7th position down. Ultimately, Garrett Gerloff came home for 7th. Axel Bassani climbing from 14th to 6th, so he gained 8th rather, so he gained 6 places on the grid, and Scott Redding will complete your 3rd row. So entertaining stuff right the way through the field, but up at the front, as you said, Superpole race gives us a very different complexion compared to race 1. We would expect a more similar race to yesterday afternoon for the final race of the weekend.
Yeah, you would certainly think that for Bautista, he'll feel that he's going to be very confident going into this one just because of how well he was able to manage the tyre for the full 23 laps yesterday. But Toprak's going to think that he made a step, and that's the main thing for him, is to see that progress and then think, I'm going to have a bike underneath me that can attack Bautista in the early stages, try and keep him at bay and see what happens throughout the full 23 laps. Yamaha do tend to make improvements from Saturday to Sunday, and Toprak, he's always in a position to attack, so we'll see how he fares over the full race distance.
Nonetheless, Bautista's pace in itself has been scintillating, even in that Super Pole race.
In yesterday's race, we saw Bautista was able to spend a lot of the time in the mid 1 minute 26s. Toprak was the high 26s, Jonathan Rea the low 27s. If Toprak's able to find something, it could bring him closer to Bautista, but probably only closer to him for longer rather than being able to battle all the way through the race.
Best thing that could happen for Toprak here is Jonathan Rea getting through on Bautista in the early stages, make his life a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, you need Jonathan to be the roadblock that he ended up being in the Super Pole race.
We know that Razgatlioglu is fast in the second half of the circuit in particular. He's made repeatedly his moves. I said it at the top of the programme. He made 2 of them yesterday to briefly lead before he was picked off by Bautista. He made them again when he needed to get to the front on Jonathan Rea in the Super Pole race. So we know that Razgatlioglu into the Melbourne hairpin in particular is going to be a big threat to anyone who's in front of him.
Yeah, Toprak into the hairpin that's his key overtaking opportunity. That's where he's really strong. He can also make moves into Goddard's if he has to. Into the foggy S's, it's a lot more open there than it used to be. It used to be a much more stop and go chicane. Now you try and roll through as much as possible, running over the curbs. It used to be a case through there, if you ran too much curb, you lost the front immediately. Now you really are able to carry an awful lot of speed through there.
Alvaro Bautista is the other threat when they come towards the Fogarty S's, of course, and we saw him making moves a little bit earlier on in the straight, and Bautista's speed through there makes it hard to think about making a pass on him under braking into those Fogarty S's. This is Jonathan Rea. He will be hoping that he can make it 3 podiums in a row. It would be the first weekend this season that he's managed 3 podiums in 3 races. That's how hard 2023 has been. He sits 4th in the World Championship standings, 15 back from Andrea Locatelli for bronze.
Yeah, we'll see how he fares in this one, because Petrucci's going to feel that he's going to be fast at the end of the race on the Ducati from the second row of the grid. Rea is going to be under pressure in the closing stages, but as it is, if you want to think about any rider that can manage to achieve something, it's Jonathan Rea. He's been able to win 6 World Championships for a reason, and it's amazing to think that the goal has to be 3 podiums in a weekend. That used to be taken for granted for Rea and Kawasaki.
Yes, and for Rea, the likes of Locatelli, Bassani, they've both improved their grid position, so they're going to be more in play for race 2 this afternoon as well.
Yeah, exactly, and we saw that the Ducati's pace was very consistent for so many riders in yesterday's race. We saw Philip Oertel was up inside the top 10. First time in a long time we've seen Oertel competitive this weekend, and then Bassani, obviously we've always grown to expect him to be riders. It's just about trying to bring yourself into the fight. We haven't seen much from the other side of the Aruba garage from Michael Ruben Rinaldi this weekend, and maybe from the 4th row of the grid he can score some decent points.
Here is your championship leader, Alvaro Bautista. He's dropped just 15 points all season long. And bear in mind that this is the 6th round of the season. We head towards the halfway mark at the end of race 2 this afternoon. 88 points is his championship lead. But it was really good to see Bautista in the Super Pole race earlier on. He wasn't defending a championship points lead. He wasn't riding in that fashion, sliding his way into the Melbourne hairpin for the final time, trying to pick off Toprak Razgatlioglu and maintain his winning run. He passed Jonathan Rea, just fell short of Razgatlioglu. 2nd place, his worst finish of 2023. Of course, he had that non-scoring race in the Indonesian round as well.
It's been perfect all the way through this season for Bautista and Ducati, but as we said at the end of the Super Pole race, the one thing that you really have to respect for Bautista is he was still willing to put it all on the line to try and win this race as well, or this morning's race as well. And that's impressive that he was willing to push as hard as possible in that last lap, came through in Jonathan Rea and wanted to put himself into a position to attack Razgatlioglu as well.
Danilo Petrucci looking pretty pleased with life at the moment, and why wouldn't he? At the Prosecco DOC UK round, a 4th and a 5th position after a front row qualifying. Finds himself 2 places further back following that 5th place in the Tissot Super Pole race. Obviously there was so much action at the front that we didn't get to see too much of Petrucci, but he has been doing a good job, and it confirms the step forward, validates really the progress that Barney said they had made at Misano last time out.
Yeah, and for Barney it was really important to be able to capitalise on the momentum momentum that they had from the previous round. They were able to have a successful test in the build-up to Misano, and from that point on, Petrucci seems like he's found something, but it's still a case of trying to get that extra confidence on the Pirelli tyres. It's a big transition for him to the World Superbike Spec Ducati, but he is adapting to it. Now this is 2 rounds in a row he's been very competitive. It'll be interesting to see how he fares when we get to Imola, and then obviously Most as well, another new track for him at the end of this summer.
We just caught a glimpse there of Andrea Locatelli. Really good to see Locatelli having such a good weekend here at Donington Park. 2 top 5 finishes for Locatelli. His best weekend here at Donington Park, and particularly after his underwhelming weekend in Misano last time out.
Just got a message from down in the grid that it's a lot windier now than it had been earlier on as well. That could be a factor for the riders out there during the course of this race. And even as we look outside our commentary box window, the dust is getting kicked up as well. So this could be a factor through the course of this one, especially with the tyres. If it tends to cool off that temperature for the tyres, it could be having an effect on the tyre wear later in the race.
Yes, you'll see it with the flags as the riders make their way out and around the circuit as well. There's 1 or 2 of those for this man, Scott Redding. And after 2 poor rounds in a row, frankly, for Redding, he has got 2 top 10 results in a row, which is exactly what he needed. And obviously challenging for top BMW, even if he was pipped by Garrett Gerloff earlier on today in the Tissot Superpole race. Alex Lowes with 2 6th places this weekend thus far. The Kawasaki man who's just had his contract confirmed for 2024. He knows he'll be back here at Donington Park next season with KRT. And Lowes, well, it's a question of what is the maximum that's available to you, and thus far 6th place has been exactly that.
Lost out a little bit at the end of both races so far this weekend. Yesterday it was due to arm pump issues after a bit of a braking issue on the Kawasaki, and then for the Superpole race lost out in those closing stages as well. But for Lowes, it's about trying to make sure you can give yourself a chance of a top 5 finish. I think that'll be a good result for him on the Kawasaki.
Yeah, very competitive, isn't it? You look all the way down to 8th position and you'd say that there are plenty of contenders for a potential 3rd step on the podium. You would probably say that Bautista and Razgatlioglu are your likely top 2. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
Yeah, for sure. They're the 2 riders that you would expect to see at the front of the field. Bautista is your clear favourite, given that he was so consistent in yesterday's race. I think someone said that he did 16 laps that were underneath the existing lap record during the course of the race. So for Bautista, really strong performance. And for Razgatlioglu, there will be a step having been made from yesterday to today. So we'll see if he's able to hang with Bautista a little bit longer. Yesterday, Alvaro was able to control the gap. And once he wanted to hit the front, he just immediately opened up a gap of 2 or 3 seconds, and then it was just a case of staying out in front.
Obviously, lap times have been superb this weekend. That's partly down to the new asphalt that's been laid, 20 years without a change, but it's been relayed over the course of this winter.
Yeah, lots of grip out there for the riders. They all feel that the track has made a big step forward. The bumps are gone. That's what Ducati has said has been one of the big factors for them in allowing them to find a big improvement here compared to what they had as their results in the past.
Yes, speaking to Luca Myers, his comments were that he was delighted that the bumps were gone. He said that they were potholes almost around the circuit. So big improvement made, all of the riders very complimentary. But it has also limited the options in terms of tyres.
It has limited the tyre options. You're using a much harder compound now compared to last year, and we'll wait and see if that's still the case in a year's time. It's a very new asphalt, so it's still quite shiny on top, still quite polished, and as it wears in, that's where you'd expect to see them back to using the traditional softer tyres that we've grown accustomed to in World SBK.
Well, we know that we'll be using harder tyres again later on in the season when we go to the likes of Most. That tends to be one of the other hard-wearing surfaces. Riders pulling into their positions on the grid, so we'll take you through the results of the Tissot Superpole race for your top 9. That is their grid position here. Toprak Razgatlioglu, the winner of that Superpole race. He was 2nd in race 1 yesterday afternoon. The 2 podiums this weekend thus far put him to within 1 of Chaz Davies on 99. So 98 podiums for Toprak Razgatlioglu. One of 2 winners over the course of this 2023 season, and Donington Park is now officially his best circuit. 6 wins and 10 podiums.
Yeah, and for Toprak, this has always been a track that he said is his favourite track, and it's because of the heavy braking zones at the end of the lap. The first half of the lap works really well for the Yamaha, and then the second half is proper Toprak territory.
Second on the grid is Alvaro Bautista. 15 wins for him in 2023. He is your championship leader by 88 points. The record for wins in a single season is 17, so Bautista won't get that this weekend, but he could be looking at chasing it down in Imola next time out. 4 podiums now at Donington Park, 2 of them in 2023, a first and a second.
And for Alvaro, yesterday was all about that consistent pace that he was able to run, and he looked so good around Donington Park, a track that, like we said, hadn't always been the happiest hunting ground for him or Ducati.
Jonathan Rea set for his 30th Donington Park race start. 18 of those thus far have ended in podium finishes, 6 of them in wins, 2 podiums out of 2 thus far in the 2023 round, 2 third places. He's looking for his first weekend of the season with 3 podiums out of 3. Second row of the grid, just missing out on the podium places in the Superpole race earlier on today, Andrea Locatelli, Danilo Petrucci and Alex Lowes. A best Donington Park weekend to date for Andrea Locatelli with a 5th and a 4th. He was P7 in Superpole, so he's climbed 3 places for P4 here. Danilo Petrucci, meanwhile, has lost 2 positions compared to his Superpole effort, but still 2 top 5 finishes. 2 top 5 finishes for him. It's been a breakthrough weekend.
It has, and for Petrucci now, it's a case trying to make sure he can back that up with 3 top 5s in the weekend would be a very strong performance.
Completing the second row of the grid, it's Alex Lowes, P5 in the Superpole session. It could have been more for him as well. 2 6th places in the weekend that he's been confirmed as a KRT runner for 2024.
Yeah, another good weekend for Lowes where he hasn't made mistakes. He's been able to have a good Superpole performance and decent efforts in the races, but the Kawasaki clearly a little bit on the back foot once again, but we'll see how he can fare in this race. At 23 laps, it's going to be a long one considering tyre life could be a little bit of a concern.
World champion 20 years ago, Neil Hodgson makes the presentation to Toprak Razgatlioglu. Victory, of course, for him in the Tissot Superpole race, and it's where he's taken his 2 wins this season so far. Nobody's been able to live with Alvaro Bautista in any feat in 2023. Third row of the grid for Garrett Gerloff, Axel Bassani and Scott Redding. Gerloff was 10th in the Superpole session, climbed 3 places in the Superpole race earlier on today. He had finished 10th in race 1. If he can have a top 7 again this afternoon, I think that would be some achievement. Right, those are your lead septet. Let's head down to the grid with Anthony Nelson.
Thanks, Alex. I'm precisely here with Garrett. And Garrett, you bounced back really well this morning in the Superpole race. For the long race, we've got a bit of a headwind coming over here. Conditions have changed a little bit. How do you feel going into the longer run?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm so disappointed about yesterday. Just, you know, I got tapped in the first corner, couldn't finish the race, and that was a bummer, but happy that we kind of made up for it in the Superpole race, and I'm feeling really good on the bike, and, you know, I'm just hoping that we can, yeah, even though conditions are a little bit crazy, I hope we can get a handle on them early on and just settle in and have a solid race.
Oh, best of luck.
Yeah, appreciate it, guys.
Garrett Gerloff then starting from P7. This is Scott Redding, the next best of the BMW runners. He will start from P9. Redding climbing up from 12th position in the Superpole session and benefiting from a spill for Tom Sykes in the Superpole race earlier on today. 2 top 10 finishes for Redding after 2 miserable weekends in a row.
Yeah, and for Redding, important to be able to come away from this race as the top BMW rider as well. And if he's able to come away with a top 8, it's a good effort on that bike. But for Redding, it's been another tough weekend, but we'll see how he can fare. Nice to be able to use Garrett Gerloff as that little bit of a yardstick during this race for him.
Between the 2 BMWs is Axel Bassani on board the Moto Corsa Ducati. 7th and 8th position finishes for him this weekend thus far, but the 8th place in the Superpole race, absolutely critical. From 14th on the grid, he gained 6 places, brings himself right back into contention.
And that's the most important thing in the Superpole race. Make sure you're able to get yourself into those top 9 spots. It scores you a couple of points for Axel Bassani in the early race today, 10-lap race, but it gives you a chance of scoring a lot of points in the big race this afternoon.
And it's really important for him because he salvaged his weekend after his fall in the Superpole session. Michael Ruben Rinaldi, by contrast, had his fall in the Superpole session, but his weekend has rather gone backwards. He failed to make the points-paying positions earlier on today. Continuing on through the grid then, originally 6th position in Superpole and losing 4 places on the grid after finishing 11th in the Superpole race. The first of our non-qualifiers, as it were, non-scorers from that Superpole race. Dominic Egerter, 12th position yesterday in race 1. 2 races outside of the top 10 positions. He's been mystifyingly suffering from a lack of grip.
Yeah, and for Dommy, it's been a tough weekend so far, but a Superbike around Donington Park is a challenge, and there's a track where you need to have that experience, and maybe for him jumping up from the Supersport bike, it's just been a little bit difficult for him. But for Dommy, we saw a really good effort in the Superpole session, but it seems that was that one lap that he was able to make it work. It's been a lot tougher for him the rest of the time.
Tom Sykes missed a Superpole in his second weekend, substituting for the injured Michael van der Mark. Sykes could have done more than P8 in Superpole. As it was, he came home for 9th position. He was just knocked out of that 8th place on the final lap by Scott Redding in race 1. Had a spill earlier on in the Superpole race, so good to see him back on the grid to line up here, P11. 9th position in the Superpole session was Michael Ruben Rinaldi, and thankfully for him, he was 9th, because that enables him to claim a place on the 4th row of the grid for race 2 this afternoon. Looking for his first top 10 finish of the weekend. He was 13th in race 1, only 17th after picking himself up out of the gravel trap in the Superpole race earlier on today.
Yeah, and important to be able to score points in this one, because it's been a tough weekend for Rinaldi up to this point, and you need to make sure that if you're trying to hold on to that factory seat, you show something in this race.
Yes, he's expecting a decision to be made after Imola. He's going to need a massive weekend at the Italian round in a fortnight's time. 5th row of the grid, losing 2 places compared to his Superpole effort, is Philip Ertl. He'll be lining up 13th here, qualified originally in 11th. Retired from race 1 with a mechanical problem within sight of the finish, just 4 turns from the end. The Go 11 team were saying he finally expired. 10th position, so again unlucky, missing out on the front 3 rows of the grid by just 1 place in the Superpole race. Big crash for Iker Lecuona in race 1, and he couldn't climb from 13th position his Superpole effort in the Superpole race earlier on today, so he lines up 14th here.
Yeah, it's been a tough season for Honda, and another big crash for Lecuona. He's obviously been carrying that knock, but for him on the Honda from the 5th row of the grid, if you're able to come away with a 10th or a 12th place finish, it's probably a good effort from the Honda team.
Yeah, this has been a difficult weekend for Honda. They've really slipped behind BMW in the pecking order at Donington Park. Here's the next of the BMWs. It's Loris Baz starting from P15. Baz, who retired from race 1, and he's had all sorts of problems over the course of the weekend. More drama in the Superpole race earlier today.
Technical issue in the early stages yesterday, a crash in the the opening lap of the Superpole race this morning. So given we lost so much running on Friday, he hasn't done an awful lot of laps this weekend.
6th row of the grid for Bradley Ray. He was caught up in a first bend spill yesterday. We haven't really been able to see the potential that Ray has. Race 2 is his only remaining opportunity. Did well to come through for 12th position in the Superpole race. A few places back from what he would have needed to improve his grid slot, so he's going to have to do it from behind once again. Yeah,
and it is a case of having to attack through the way, but certainly for Brad Ray, he knows this track inside out. He was unfortunate in the Superpole session to have his fastest lap to lead it, but for him it's about trying to score some points and just make that step that he has to make instead of fighting with some of the riders in the 18th, 19th position, try and get into those points battles.
Xavi Vierque, 11th place in race 1, 14th in the Superpole race, so just a single point scoring finish for him, and Superpole has been a consistent weakness for him in 2023. Means he'll be starting all the way down in 17th place. 18th place on the grid for Remy Gardner. He climbed well to 10th position and beat Dominic Egerton, his teammate, which hasn't been easy for him in 2023. Didn't have a good Superpole race though. Once again, he'll be starting from P18.
Yeah, it's been a tricky start to the season for Remy. You're still trying to gain that experience, adapting to a superbike after a year in MotoGP, but for him it's about trying to make the steps. He's been outperformed by Domi Aguilar through the course of the season so far, but here at Donington, then Imola and Most, we'll see if those rounds in quick succession can help give him that bit of confidence that he needs. As we said previously, rows 6, 7 and 8 on the grid are unchanged compared to the 2 previous races of the weekend. Tito Rabat qualifying in P19, just missed out on a points paying position in race 1, 20th in the Superpole race for him, so no improvement. Hafiz Shireen looking for his first points of the weekend as well, 17th in race 1 and 19th earlier on today. He qualified in 20th. And Isaac Vinales completes your 7th row. Now, he did manage to snag a point in race 1, but was well out of contention in the Superpole race, so we'll see how he gets on here. Completing your grid will be Lorenzo Baldassari, P22, Eric Granado on his injury comeback weekend, and likewise for Oliver Koenig. He was a non-qualifier but was granted a place on the grid, and he rounds out your 24 runners. Anthony Nelson down on the grid. Let's hear from you.
Well, I'm here with 2003 World Superbike champion Neil Hodgson, and Neil, you've been here all weekend. Who's your money on for this one?
Well, I think it's a safe bet. I'm going to go for, I think he's a young Spanish rider. He's got some potential. He luckily won the title last year, but I'm going to go for Alvaro Bautista. I mean, I don't really need to say any more, do I? I mean, the way he's riding is phenomenal. When you see the harmony of rider and bike working perfectly. Yes, he's got some more horsepower, but I tell you what, he's also very fast around the corners.
Well, the guys made it difficult for him this morning. Do you think they can, especially in the first laps, make it difficult for him in race 2?
Absolutely, and that's plan A for everybody. For Jonathan, I know, and certainly for Toprak, is to try and fluster, disturb Alvaro in any way they can. The problem with Alvaro, if he gets half a second, he's gone, because then he can use his sweeping lines and use his great technique, and yeah, the race will be over. So I hope it's going to be a closer fight. Donington can sometimes, it's breezy, it feels even windier, doesn't it, standing down here, so who knows, we might be in for a surprise.
Hopefully have a good race in any case. Thank you for speaking to us.
Thank you, my pleasure.
The young Spaniard, Alvaro Bautista. I suppose it's all relative.
Relative to Neil Hodgson anyway, but interesting there, Hodgie, talking about the wind picking up as well. That is one of the factors we're going to have to consider during the course of this race. 23 laps. It's going to be a long race for these riders because of the new track surface. Yesterday we saw that everyone was able to manage the tyre quite well, but in this race they're going to push harder a little bit earlier in the race, and then we have to see if that cooling wind has an impact on the tyre life.
Well, we positively rattled through the grid there, the 24 riders who will be heading off for the 23 laps of this race 2 here at Donington Park. 50,000 fans are in attendance, and hope you're hanging on tight. We're looking forward to a good one, particularly the early laps. We know that over the course of the longer race distance, Alvaro Bautista should have the edge, but us having a fight for top spot might well depend on this man, Toprak Razgatlioglu.
Yeah, Toprak needs to get into that scrap right from the start. That's what he's going to do as well. We've seen it time and again where Toprak knows that the only way he can win races against Alvaro Bautista is from the front, like what we heard from Hodgie there. If Alvaro opens up a gap, he can ride how he wants to ride. You need to disrupt his rhythm. You need to make sure you're in his way and he can't use the strength of that Ducati.
Reality is it doesn't even need to be as much as half a second. If Bautista is clear of being overtaken, that enables him to ride the line he wants.
Well, the key thing is yesterday we saw that Alvaro could attack on the run down the Dunlop straight and carry enough speed through there that you couldn't attack back into the chicane. So once that's the case, it's almost impossible to attack against him. It's going to be interesting to see what Toprak can do from pole.
Here are your two favourites then. Alvaro Bautista from second on the grid, and Toprak Razgatlioglu. His victory in the Tissot Superpole race means he will lead them away for the second time in 2023 on Sunday afternoon.